Welcome to this week's episode of the Unsettling Minds of the Madness, where we try to decode and find out what are the psychological reasons that some of the most high-profile criminals have committed murder. Before we begin, I do want to state some disclaimers/trigger warnings. In this episode, I'll be talking about cannibalism, pedophilia, abuse, self-harm, rape, mental illness, and murder. This week, we will be analyzing Albert Fish. The 1920s and 1930s saw a number of horrifying atrocities carried out by the American cannibal and serial killer Albert Fish. He was born in Washington, D.C. in 1870 and was well known for his cruel and painful deeds, which included the death of numerous children. Due to his peculiar actions and appearance, he was frequently called the Moon Maniac and the Gray Man. Finally, Fish was captured, tried, and given a death sentence, which he gladly accepted. In 1936, he was put to death using an electric chair. Fish is still regarded as one of the most notorious serial killers in American history. Now I will be analyzing his childhood, growing up, and life story. Hamilton Howard Fish, mostly known as Albert Fish, was born on May 19, 1870 in Washington, D.C. He was the fifth child to be born to Ellen Bray and Randolph Fish. His upbringing was plagued by various terrible occurrences that would impact his adult life. Fish's father was a Civil War veteran who was absent for much of Fish's upbringing. His mother, on the other hand, was a religious zealot who frequently beat her children as a sort of punishment for their sins. Fish's childhood was characterized by poverty, neglect, and abuse, which had tremendous impact on his mental health and well-being. It was well known that Fish's mother had emotional instability and exhibited unpredictable conduct. She would, for instance, confine Fish and his siblings to the attic for days without supplying them with food or drink, while savagely beating them with a whip made of cables. Fish's mental health was negatively impacted by this type of treatment because it caused him to feel as though he had to continually guard against danger and insecurity. Fish was profoundly traumatized at the age of 5 after witnessing a terrible rape and murder. Throughout his childhood, he had also had a number of physical wounds, including a serious burn on his left hand and a broken skull that he sustained while attempting to aid his brother who was involved in a fight. The twisted and vicious nature of Fish may have been influenced by these horrific events. Fish also struggled to build lasting relationships and comprehend the world around him because of his upbringing, which was marked by a lack of education and socialization. Fish felt alone and detached because of his lack of education and socialization, which may have contributed to his eventual aberrant behavior. Fish enlisted in the army in his late teens, but his unstable mental state led to his prompt release. After being released, he started to move about and work odd jobs as a transient. He had 6 children after getting married in 1898, but he was a violent parent and spouse. Fish had a reputation as a notorious child molester in the early 20th century, preying on young boys. By promising them money or jobs, he would entice them into his home where they would be subjected to horrifying sexual abuse. In 1928, he killed and cannibalized a 10-year-old kid, which was his first known murder. Fish committed murder and cannibalism throughout the course of the following years as his depravity grew. After a letter he had written to the boy's mother was identified, he was eventually apprehended in 1934. He was found guilty at trial and given the death penalty. On January 16, 1936, Fish was executed using an electric chair. He was described as a pleasant man with a peaceful demeanor and a strong religious commitment, despite the fact that he committed countless horrifying acts. In conclusion, Albert Fish experienced trauma, neglect, and abuse as a child, all of which had significant impact on his behavior and mental health. It was challenging for him to build lasting relationships and comprehend the world around him because of his background, which was marked by a lack of education and socialization. These elements contributed to Fish's sick and sadistic mentality, which helped him become one of the most infamous cannibals and serial killers in American history. He is thought to have a history of sexual deviancy, serious mental disease, and childhood maltreatment, as well as other psychiatric reasons for his actions. He also had a religious illusion, thinking that God had ordered him to perform his crimes. He had a history of self-harm and mutilation, as well as auditory and visual hallucinations. Fish's aggressive behavior and criminal activity were significantly influenced by his mental disorder. Early on, Fish exhibited indicators of mental illness. He was raised in a harsh, violent home and was born into a big, poor family. He received harsh punishment from his devoted Christian parents for any wrongdoing. At an age, he displayed odd conduct, rage fits, an obsession with religion, and self-inflicted pain, all indicators of mental instability. Fish's mental state deteriorated as he aged. He experienced delusions and hallucinations, and his obsession with religion and self-harm grew. He asserted that the devil and God visited him, sent him messages, and gave him instructions to commit sadomasochism and self-destructive activities. He also got interested in cannibalism, which he thought was a type of religious piety. Fish's mental illness was probably caused by a variety of elements, such as difficult upbringing, substance misuse, and a lack of access to mental health care. He might have had schizophrenia, a severe mental illness marked by delusions, hallucinations, and distorted thinking. He might also have had borderline personality or bipolar disorder, both of which are linked to unpredictable conduct and emotional instability. Fish managed to live a very normal life and even held a number of jobs during his life, despite his unsettling conduct. He was one of America's most known serial killers because of his vast trip he undertook while preying on young children and executing heinous crimes. Albert Fish was mentally sick, and this contributed significantly to his criminal actions. He was diagnosed with a number of mental illnesses, including schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, and borderline personality disorder, which probably contributed to his violent and sadistic behavior. Despite the horrifying acts he committed, many people are still interested in learning more about Fish's life and continue to research his case and his intentions.